For those who don't know me, I'm Mardi Nowak. I'm the head of visual arts at RACV, and I'm super excited to have Kirstin Berg talk to us today. Basically, this In Conversation is part of the RACV partnership with M Pavilion, where we're taking different programs and conversations on the road with a focus on regional Victoria. We feel it's incredibly important to support our artists and galleries, particularly during this difficult time, as well as inspire and encourage our communities to keep engaging with art. And I know that I'm doing a lot of online things at the moment from both, Melbourne and beyond. So we wanted to bring Kirstin in today. She's got a fantastic, beautiful, thought-provoking exhibition at Benalla Art Gallery, who we're partnering with. And as part of these conversations, we wanted to hear more from Kirstin, her art practice, and talk a bit more about this current exhibition, Still in Love with the World. So Kirstin, I wanted to start off with that title because it's such a striking title and it's a very strong statement, but for me, it's also kind of a question. Can you just sort of talk a little bit why this statement's so important and, how it fits in with this body of work?
Thanks, Mardi. It's a good starting point. I think the title is almost everything for this show right now. It's so relevant still. It's interesting you say it's a statement because the title is very much a statement, but it came to me as a question. So the idea first came to me about a year ago as a question and as a very desperate question. It was literally, how do I stay in love with the world when there were so many things happening in my personal life and in the world and for many people around me? There was a lot of devastation and a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression. There was just so much going on at that time in my life for myself and a lot of people around. And I remember lying in bed one night and thinking, how can I stay in love with the world? What can I do to, shift things up and keep it? So it came from a really desperate place for me, but it's really interesting because as it sort of stayed, it was about a year ago, I sort of had that question. It's like, what can I do to shift things around? How can I improve things, And over that time, it sort of slowly became a statement rather than a question. It was almost like a mantra, like, I am still in love with the world and I will not give up. So it kind of became, the title came way before the work did, which is quite interesting because often I'll do the work and the title will come during or after.
Yep.
Very much this title just came in like a freight train, and it became a sort of a statement and also a kind of for myself, a statement for myself, but also sort of a dare for the audience, like still in love with the world, so are you still in love with the world, or how are you going to be still in love with the world? So It was kind of, it's interesting. It came from such a dark place for me, but in the end, the work and the show and the statement has become really a form of real strength and inspiration, and the work itself is quite uplifting, I think. So it's kind of interesting the process of where it came from, which kind of mirrors the work as well, is that it's always about transforming something from one state to another state.
Another.
Yeah.
I didn't want to kind of really kick off in talking loads about COVID and this sort of shutdown time, but I guess for you, how have you found this time? You've got this amazing show on at Benalla, and it's on, it's off again, it's on again, it's happening. How are you finding, this sort of shutdown time?
I'll start off by saying I'm in a really fortunate position because I have a great partner and we have, a beautiful place to be for this time. And I feel supported, financially during this time. And I know that's not the case for many people. So I really acknowledge that I'm very lucky in this particular moment. And also I had the work for Benalla already done, pre the shutdowns and stuff. So that work was kind of done and finished. And it was originally meant to open in April, but then everything was up in the air with the lockdown, the first round in Melbourne. So we pushed it back to a July opening. So we sort of had this window of opportunity where I was able to put it in and then hello everyone and then shut it down again. But so the timing for me has been okay, because I sort of had that sort of real flourish of work making and then had the show. And so the lockdown's really been such a reflective time for me, because I've been able to sort of sit with this weird exhibition I've got on that's sort of on and off again. Mm-hmm. But despite that, and despite all the obstacles, there's just been this really beautiful opening of connection for me, because I've been getting, you know, a random message on Instagram from someone in Benalla who was able to see my show, who I've never met, would send me a really lovely message, and just sort of getting all these new connections still from the show without actually being there, without actually opening. And I just think that's really quite amazing. So I've been really focusing on that, and also just kind of taking stock and seeing, you know, this isn't going to go forever, and what are we going to do differently on the other side, you know, and how can we approach things a little bit differently? And I'm talking about myself, you know, how am I going to, you know, change things up? Because I think there needs to be some changes, and this is a time to reflect on what they might be coming out, you know, and into whatever the world looks like after we come out of this.
Yeah, I mean, you've exhibited all over the place, you know, internationally, and through Australia as well. Can you just talk a little bit about why you felt it was important to have a show regionally, particularly with Benalla, and perhaps any kind of connections that you have there?
Well, I actually grew up in Beechworth in northeast Victoria. So that's about an hour further along the Hume Highway from where Benalla is, if you were heading towards Sydney. It's an old gold mining town. But Briony Namby actually contacted me in 2018. She was the director of the gallery at the time, and she was really interested in kind of giving exposure to northeast Victoria, or people that had, you know, a connection to northeast Victoria, and also giving exposure to women artists. And sort of I just, you know, we just had that click, that worked. So we made that sort of, you know, idea to like have a show. And then a few months passed, and then Bryony got the job at Arts Craft Victoria. So there was a gap where, you know, we didn't quite know if it was going ahead.
Is it going on?
And then Eric Nash came in, and it was like, yes, let's do this. So the whole show, way before lockdown, you know, it already had this kind of, is this happening? Is this not? But it's been amazing, because Eric just came in and went, yep, we're doing this. And, you know, the gallery has been incredible. So the connection is definitely for me to Northeast Victoria, and that I grew up there. And it's interesting too, because it's 20 years since I had my first solo show. So coming back 20 years later, sort of, you know, it's a very similar region. It was kind of really reflective to come back and see, wow, sort of think of that 20 years and really sort of look at it as a block of time. And yeah, it's been really quite amazing. I mean, And do you still feel a connection, I guess, to the sort of regional spaces? I do. Well, the thing for me is I no longer have family or really much connection, like personal connection to where I grew up. But I do have a really strong connection to the land and the bush environment. And I feel such an affinity with that, because, you know, it was such a formative thing for me growing up essentially in the bush. And so the Benalla landscape is different from Beechworth, but there's so much connection to that. So I really feel an affinity with that. And as soon as I go into those regional areas, I feel very free in many ways, you know. It's that, you know, that kind of environment. Yeah. It was really lovely to go back and have that experience. And I hope that the show does reopen so I can actually get to meet more of the local people, because I kind of went in and installed, and then I was out again, and then now I'm locked in Melbourne. So who knows? But I hope that's the case, because the show will be up until November. So
as a young person who's lived regionally, well, you know, you were a young person living regionally. What do you think the importance of arts and having that kind of confidence to move into, you know, the art world and, you know, making it as an artist? You know, what would be your advice for other people, you know, regionally who are wanting to make that move?
Do you mean for young people that are? I've got a biased opinion. Well, how can it not be? But
it's your opinion, so it is
because it's mine. when I was 14, my mum died, and I went straight to art, and I was really lucky because I had an amazing art teacher. I was at a really small high school in Beechworth, but I had an incredible art teacher. Mark, if you ever hear this, thank you. He may well. And so I think that having, you know, I guess we've talked about mentors, and I don't want to jump too far ahead to other topics, but I think they're really connected, is that, you know, he wasn't just a teacher, he was a real mentor, and he was someone, you know, who saw that I was really interested in art and had a lot of grief because my mother had died, and I just poured everything into the art making, and he just looked at that and went, I'm going to back you. And, you know, I really think you only need one person like that to really get behind you, and it has to be obviously the right person. But, you know, because everyone else and a lot of the pressures were that, you know, art wasn't, you know, this is a while ago, obviously, but art wasn't a career path, and it wasn't going to make me money, and it would make my life a misery, you know, and it's not the case, you know, and it's not the sort of, you know, linear trajectory that a lot of other careers are. So, you know, I think in those regional areas, my take would be that, you know, we have to have mentors, and we have to have all kinds of ages, you know, in any community, you know, like my age and older. Like, I need young people, you know, just as much as they need me. I feel like it's a really reciprocal thing, you know, like I learn a lot from younger people, and hopefully they learn something from me, and I will learn something from people that are older. And so making sure that we have those, you know, groups of, you know, those generational groups of like, in all communities, but especially regional communities, because I think access is often really hard for people, or, you know, and I think, you know, when you live in the city and you go out, you can gain a lot of knowledge from being in the regionals. So I think it's just access and that sharing, and, you know, and I think the mentor thing is very important, or the teaching, having those people when you're younger that can actually say, look, this is what I've done, and I can show you what I've done. You're going to have to find your own way in this, but I've done this, and I can share what worked for me, and kind of walk alongside you, because I think it's an incredibly hard thing to persevere as a young person if you don't have someone to really be behind you and believe in you before you can believe in yourself, kind of thing. You know, because you kind of, when you're younger, so full of, you know, whatever, if you've got someone goes, I can see the potential, then, you know, that's certainly what my case was. I was really lucky. I don't think I would have pursued it if I didn't have that art teacher behind, you know, thinking that it was a worthwhile thing to do. So
yeah, definitely. I guess I'll sort of shift a little bit and think about how, well, I guess what materials you use and why, you know, and what's kind of moved you into this sort of way of creating.
Yeah, I think I've always been drawn to materials that already have a history to them, you know, and that because of that history, they also have a drama to them of a kind, you know. So, for example, in this show, I've used there's a bed sculpture, and within that there's a lot of forms that are created from clothing that I've literally just found, discarded clothing that I found on the streets and in the city parks. And to me, that clothing, like if I'm walking, and it just jumps out at me because it's something that somebody's worn. It has a whole history that I don't know anything about. It's really compelling to me, those materials that, you know, you walk around, the world is full of these amazing things that you can use, you know. And I've always thought of art that way, that I've been, whatever reason, drawn to using those materials that often have been sort of discarded as well from society. You know, like, you know, a lot of the stuff's made from reclaimed furniture or floorboards or fence palings that I found, you know. And I think these are sort of things that, they're trash, they're no longer of worth, they're discards. But to me, I think they're an artist's dream, because, you know, I think you can take all those things, and I guess at the core of what I'm on about behind my work also, you know, is that all materials have an energy and a power, and you can manipulate them and you can change them, and they can be transformed into one state into another. And you can burn things, you know, because I use fire ash in my work as well. You can use water and saturate them. So there's all these sort of alchemical processes to do with changing wreckage into something of a higher state.
And sort of transforming, as well.
Yeah. And I just think those things that already have a history to them, whether it's like, pieces of bark or glass or broken windows or wood or all those materials, they give me something to work with in a way. Whereas if I went into an art store and there's all these pristine, pieces of pristine canvas and stuff, I actually don't feel a connection there. I sort of need something to start off with that gives me a little bit of, some tension or something like that. Yeah. I've always wanted my work to be very open, in that respect. Like I would never say this work is about this, this and this and this.
Yeah.
It's never the case. It's actually about huge themes that everyone can identify with. But then after that, it's such a personal thing, and I love the fact that when I get these random messages from people, that have seen my work, they're very different responses. And I love that about it. And also I think if those materials that I've sourced from, the everyday world, people that maybe don't look at art as much, that might be in, that they don't often go to a gallery, but they might come and see a piece and they might see something in those materials that they can recognize, even though it might be an abstract kind of work. They can make a connection there with those materials, and then that links back for them. So there's all those subconscious, connections that come through.
Yeah.
And I love that idea that, we do all connect to those, the subterranean kind of, aspects in art. It's magic. It's kind of magic in a way. The show is quite abstract in many ways, like the work itself is, it's not literal, like, you don't say still in love with the world and then you go in and you know how to be in love with the world. It's not going to be, let's tell you how to do this. I guess, like I think you said earlier, it's a very slow, quiet, maybe exhibition that requires the viewer or whoever's there, it requires them to do the work, it requires them to actually reflect back and ask the questions for themselves. Well, that's what I guess the intention is. It's not for me to solve anything. I'm not trying to solve anything. I'm actually just saying, still in love with the world, what does this mean for you, basically, and that's not going to resonate with everybody, but, if there's a space where people can actually sit in that space and sort of reflect for themselves, what are the things that keep them, activated in their own life. And I guess for me, the show and the making of it was about activating myself into, like a call to arms almost for myself to, right, it's not time to give up. It's actually time to really step up, and what I feel that is required from all of us is stepping up, and really activating ourselves in the world. And that's how we're going to get through. That's how you get through things, and I guess behind the work is that, and that's not essentially obvious when you look at it, but it comes from that place where I guess it promotes that reflection for the viewer. And it's a subconscious landscape to me, it's come from my subconscious, but I actually think that the themes that I'm always dealing with, which are essentially love, death, life, I like big universal themes for everybody. They're absolutely for everybody. And I think most people can tap into something there because it's about being human. It's not about a trend or a theme. It's actually about really human, emotional, strong things that are happening to everyone right now. So I was concerned because the work was made pre-COVID that, this is not going to be relevant, because the world has shifted. But strangely enough, the show feels solid because the driving things behind it, are essentially those universal themes that are actually always to me relevant, and always can be, there can always be a connection to those things. So I'm really pleased that is just sitting in this weird space we're living in now with this weird virtual show in Victoria. But it seems like somehow I feel very solid it just feels like it's still doing something. I feel like art has a real power to do things, and I think it's doing something regardless. And I'm really, excited by that.
Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. And, you know, I'm really excited to be able to share your work and your methodology of how you make and the ideas behind it, you know, with a much broader audience during lockdown. But also, you know, I know whenever we do these sorts of talks that people always want to hear directly from the artist, you know, and like we're saying, sort of that kind of sense of magic, you know, how does it happen? You know, people are always amazed by that. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing, you know, your thoughts and being so open and honest as well during this conversation. So thank you. And when does the show actually go on to? It's like November
15th of November.
15th.
Eric was just, we're going to have people see this show. People are going to see this show. So they were able to push back, you know, their roster a little bit. And so it's on till the 15th of November. Yeah. And so it may have another little opening, you know. Yeah. So that would be great if we could get to the point where we could actually have an opening in the physical. We don't know if we can, but if we can, that would be wonderful, because that means I could go there and, you know, meet some people and, you know, be in the flesh.
Their responses. Yeah.
So here's hoping to that. But yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to have a chat. And I'm not, you know, I'm so much better. And I always feel like, oh, real life, you know. Yeah. So hopefully we'll get to meet you in real life sooner rather than later.
Awesome. Okay.
Thanks,
we'll leave
Mardi.
it there, and I'll chat to you soon.
Ciao.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.